Recently I picked up this Stanley Bailey hand plane for around $50, brand new from one of the big box stores. Now naturally that'll tell you that it's not on the same quality as the old style Stanley Baileys, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad one. So today we're going to give you a few tips on how to take a cheap hand plane and make it perform almost as good as one of the expensive ones. Stick with us. Now after reading through this little instruction manual you get with this, I'll have to give them props on this one. It's got a fairly detailed setup on these planes and how to set them up, how to sharpen, that kind of thing. So if you get this one, definitely give that a read. That's packing material. And they've just got this wrapped in sort of almost like a butcher paper. And there it is. Stanley. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but hidden deep down in the depths of behind this knob, it also says Bailey, so they're still using that Stanley Bailey name. So before we get too far into anything, I just want to say that I am a hybrid woodworker. And if any of you know anything about woodworking, basically that means I use power tools and hand tools. I know there are some people who stick strictly to hand tools. Got a lot of respect for those guys. It takes a lot of time to get their projects done, and that's the main reason I'm a hybrid woodworker. I just want to get it to where I can get it done quick because I've got a lot of projects coming in and out. So with that being said, you'll notice throughout the video the way I set my hand plane down. Yes, I'm not super disciplined in that area. A lot of the hand tool woodworkers will tell you to keep this thing stored on its edge. That way your blade is not contacting wood and causing it to go dull. So I apologize for that, but hey, it's worked for me all these years. And it doesn't take that long to just tune it up on the leather strop, go back at it with the diamond stone, however we need to do it. It's not too difficult, so either way it works for me. You do what you need to do in your wood shop. So I'm going to go over the names of a few parts of these, if that concerns you at all. You've got the base plate, of course. You've got the depth adjustment screw. Pretty sure they call that the lever cap. Here you have the iron, or the blade as some call it. And you've got the chip breaker. And this piece right here is what's known as the frog. If you look at it from the front, it kind of looks like a frog, and I assume that's why they named it that. So what we're going to be doing to upgrade this thing and making it perform like an expensive hand plane, we're going to, finish up some of the details that the factories don't tend to do. Main thing being getting the sole of this hand plane flat. I always flatten the edges as well. We're going to take the frog and flatten that, just so that the iron has something flat to set against. And a couple other things we're going to do here. Some of these are not a very good finished surface. They're really rough from the factory, and it's caused some scratches on top of the chip breaker here, which is not super important. We're going to go ahead and clean that up. And then finally, we're going to be sharpening the blade, making this thing cut like a razor. Now I don't know how many models of this particular hand plane they make these days, but it says if you get the Stanley Bailey version, which is the one I picked up, it comes with this frog adjustment screw, which allows this to be moved back and forth to hopefully kind of close in that hole, kind of, prevent tear out and that kind of stuff. We're going to get a better cut. So that's a good positive right there. But the first thing we're going to do here, as far as getting it set up and having a much better tool, we're going to take this frog out of here. And that involves these two screws. Machine screws, I'm assuming, that are a flathead. And they do have a washer underneath. And it's a good idea too, to get this thing flat, to go ahead and take this screw out that holds your blade and the lever down. Also, there's a Phillips screw in behind here. You want to take this depth adjusting knob all the way off to get to it. It's kind of in an inconvenient spot, but it doesn't feel very tight. So once you get that off, that's exactly how it comes off. You can probably go ahead and set this to the side, that way we can flatten this piece. Now there is a small roll pin in here. You don't have to necessarily take this out and to get that out of the way or anything like that. It's not necessarily, as long as you can kind of come at it at an angle from both edges, you're going to get that flat enough to where it's going to be a much better plane. So I've got this solution on here. I use it a lot when I'm, sharpening chisels, that kind of stuff, setting the edge on them. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing started here. Probably going to take a decent amount, and you want to make sure to not be hitting this thing. It could cause some damage, some wear on the edges. And if you can see, just in the few short moments I've ran across through there, high spots here and here, here. Take a little bit. Now, very center doesn't have to be perfect. Mainly the outer edges is what you're looking for. Work on the other side. As you can tell by the stone, it's moving a decent amount of material. So hopefully we'll get that knocked down pretty soon, and we'll come back once we get that all flattened out. Now this is not the best setup, but I've got a piece of sandpaper taped down here. I don't have a piece of granite or anything like that on hand, so this is flat enough. And we'll take a marker and just draw along the bottom. And you can see I've kind of been working at it a little bit, but you want this thing fully assembled when you're flattening this thing. That way there's no flex and that kind of stuff in here. But you want to make sure your blade is pulled back to where you're not actually, sanding the end of your blade. So as you can see, we've got the bottom pretty flat, a few minor dips here, but I don't think that's going to cause us any issues. The main bottom, the sole of it is good and flat. Now, that being said, you can stop right there if you want to. If you plan on using a shooting board, using this with a shooting board and that kind of stuff, you want to do the sides, and you want to make sure they're 90 degrees. You don't want to be doing a shooting board and then all of a sudden you're a degree off and then your angles aren't matching up. While you've got everything tore back down, we're going to get ready to sharpen the blade. Good idea to go ahead and take you some paste wax, put on the outside of this to kind of prevent rust from setting up. And for all you guys who used to like the Johnson's paste wax, you probably noticed that it's not on the market anymore. I found these in a big box store, but Min-Max makes one that's pretty close to it, that serves the purpose, and it's a suitable one. But since that's not on the market anymore, go pick you up a can of this. It's a little more expensive than Johnson's used to be, but it works just fine. We're going to go ahead and take the blade and the chip breaker apart. And I will say it's a good idea to pay attention how close you are on the end of that chip breaker. You don't want it dead on it, but you don't want it way back either, causing chatter. So we're going to take that apart. And the first thing you probably want to do is go ahead and set the bevel on this. Like I said, it's usually 30 degrees. We'll go ahead and get that sharpened up. Generally, I do it by hand just because I don't have a good home guide for that. We'll go ahead and do that. It's the way I do it, which is the way a lot of people do it. Lay this thing down, raise it up, and you can feel that bevel hit. And then you just move back and forth. And you can see we're already putting some shiny spots on it. So we've got this thing pretty good about where we need it to be. Go a little finer on it. You can see just tiny little spots here we can get, but that really doesn't matter as long as the main edge is sharp. And naturally, whenever you sharpen these things, you want to flatten the back, but you also feel just the tiniest little burr on there, and just a couple quick passes over this thing will get rid of that. And that's what I do with the chisels. I always got a leather strap around, just an old piece of leather with some green rouge on it. Same way you do with that, just find that bevel. And this you want to pull straight back 20-30 times. And you want to have some good pressure putting down on it. And with enough of that, you can see we've basically got a mirror finish on that. It should be good and sharp. So I've got a couple samples of different types of wood here. I've got a piece of pine set up in here. Generally kind of going to be the soft. I've got some cedar. We'll try a little bit of that. I've got a piece of oak too, just because it's scrap. You know, I don't really want to get into none of my good stuff at the moment. Let's go ahead and get started. Really smooth cut, no tear out along those lines. I'm really pleased with that. It cuts smooth. So let's try a different piece of wood right now. Now, this being cedar, it does have a tendency to have bad spots in it that kind of splinter out, but for the most part that thing is butter smooth. Now we'll try a piece of oak. So what I set out to do with this video was to see if we could take just a cheap ordinary hand plane with a little bit of elbow grease, see if we could turn it into one that feels like a much more expensive hand plane. And after using it just for a little bit, I'll say that as of right now, cuts better than any hand plane I've ever had a hold of. And these shavings kind of speak for themselves. And as I said at the beginning of the video, if you're a professional woodworker, this is probably not the one you're going to jump into. You know, you're probably going to pay for a more expensive one, and that's fine. But if you're kind of the DIYer, you're just doing this on the side or on the weekend, I think this will serve you just fine. And I feel like it's going to serve me just fine in my wood shop. So that brings us to the end of the video. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. And we'll see you on the next one.